Hi everyone, this is Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney Steve Descano. You've heard me talk many times about mass incarceration, but many people still don't know what that means. Let's talk about it a little deeper. When I say mass incarceration, what I mean is the number of people who are behind bars in this country because most actors in the criminal justice system have a knee-jerk reaction to treat anyone who comes in contact with the system as harshly as possible and lock them up for as long as possible, no matter how minor their offense, and regardless of whether that tactic makes our community more or less safe. There are a lot of factors that have contributed to mass incarceration, but one significant, often overlooked piece of the puzzle is prosecutors who overcharge crimes. In our office, we've changed that. In prosecuting a crime, we must consider several factors, including how to best ensure accountability and keep the community safe. In cases where a misdemeanor charge is sufficient to meet those goals, we don't want to pursue felony charges. The reason is that unnecessarily creating felons leads to more crime being committed in the future. Felony charges have serious long-term consequences that can far outweigh the crime committed. Although felony charges are warranted for serious crimes, in other cases, their use can be both unjust and unwise from a public safety perspective. Those convicted of felony charges face major hurdles to pursuing education, applying for jobs, and securing housing. All of that leads to more crime. In fact, the unnecessary creation of felons creates a vicious cycle of decreased opportunity, increased poverty, and increased crime that becomes a dominant force in communities where that cycle takes hold. This cycle disproportionately affects people of color and people without wealth, driving wealth inequality and the racial opportunity gap. There are a few reforms my office immediately introduced to try to tackle mass incarceration. On my first day in office, we stopped prosecuting simple possession of marijuana. We did so for a few reasons. Obviously, we want to avoid creating criminal records for no reason and disrupting people's lives as much as possible. Locking up someone who is in possession of marijuana doesn't make us any safer. In fact, it has made us less safe because the limited opportunities upon release drive further criminal activity. We also don't want to burn resources prosecuting cases that will not make us safer in the long run. Virginia followed our lead and legalized possession of small amounts of marijuana with no negative safety effects. We've also changed how we prosecute larceny. When I ran for this office, Virginia's felony larceny threshold was set at just $500. Remember the long-term effects of felony charges that I mentioned earlier? We don't want to ruin someone's life and put them on a path to a lifetime of escalating criminal activity because of an impulsive decision to steal an iPhone. Felony charges should be reserved for those who plan to steal something of significant value, which is why I've directed my prosecutors to use misdemeanor, not felony charges, for thefts that do not exceed $1,500 in value. This $1,500 threshold brings us closer in line with other jurisdictions, as 15 states have thresholds at or above this value. Since we've made this change, Virginia has followed our example and raised the state's felony larceny threshold. And finally, we've stopped asking for cash bail, the process which lets those accused of crimes pay to be released from jail while awaiting trial. We've done this for a variety of reasons, but it has an undeniable link to mass incarceration. When you're detained pretrial, you're likely to have downstream consequences, such as a loss of a job or housing. When you lose your job and housing, you're much more likely to turn to criminal activity. Cash bail helps perpetuate this cycle, but we're trying to break it. By not using cash bail, my office focuses only on dangerousness to determine whether someone should be held pretrial, not how much money they have in their bank account. This keeps the community safe while reducing racial and wealth disparities. Locking up everybody that makes a mistake might make us feel safer, but it doesn't make us any safer. It's quite the opposite. If we want to make our community safer in the long run, we need to make sure the system isn't unnecessarily creating more felons and more crime. If we reform the system correctly, we can end mass incarceration, help bridge the racial opportunity gap, and keep our community safer in the long run.